Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. To the Man Who Followed Me to the Park by Batshit Crazy Bay. I'm a 21-year-old female, and I've lived alone since I was 18. When I was around 18 or 19, I would often take walks to a park that wasn't too far from my apartment complex. I had a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend now, at the time, who was a couple months older than me, but unfortunately was at work when I decided to go out for a walk. I should mention that there's a bus stop at the left end of my street that wasn't too far from the park. I remember stopping at the end of the block, waiting for cars to let me pass. Then for some reason I looked over at the bus stop and saw a man staring me down. After noticing this, I really didn't care if the cars would let me pass or not. So I just walked into the road, and I almost got hit, but I just wanted to be far away from that guy. There was a high school that was probably 5 or 10 minutes away from the park, and I remember looking back at the school because it's where I was attending at the time. Then I saw that the man who had been staring me down from the bus stop was now following me. I started to panic a little. I think I even texted my ex-boyfriend about how I was pretty sure I was being followed. I kept looking back behind me and made sure there was a good sizable distance between us, but I knew if I slowed my pace, something bad was about to happen. I eventually got to the park and started getting really anxious. My reasons being, well, one, the park entrance was down a hill and split into 2 separate paths that you couldn't see into due to the trees simply being in the way. 2, knowing that no one would have been able to see what could have happened to me if I chose to go down into one of those 2 paths. And 3, I was off from work and school that day, and it was 2 p.m., which typically meant nobody was in the park around that time. As I started walking down the winding hill, I saw a woman with 2 kids and a dog. I remember the instant relief, and furthermore, the safety I felt when seeing her. I even picked up my pace to get to her quicker because I was scared out of my mind. I still remember the exact conversation I had with her to this day. I said, "Hi, I know this may seem weird, but I live down the hill, and while I was crossing the intersection where the bus stop is, I noticed this guy staring at me who started following me. Can you just act like you know me if this man comes down here?" Before she could even reply, I tilted my head up to the man who was about to come down the hill. When I did that, I think he panicked slightly and started walking away. The woman saw the seriousness of the situation and gathered her kids up into her stroller. I don't know what made him decide to do this next, but as she was trying to get things packed up, the guy at some point had turned back around and was now coming down the hill. I told her that he was coming, and the woman moved quicker than ever to get her things packed up, and even I started helping. As he walked up to us, he immediately started trying to ask me questions. I can't remember everything he said, but I remember the woman was pretty much answering for me. I guess he had tried to ask if we knew one another, which of course she lied by telling him that she did know me, and I was coming down to walk back with her. I do know I backed her up with that claim. I just wanted that guy to leave me alone, and now her and her family. He asked us a couple of more questions, and eventually we excused ourselves and started our way back up the hill. I remember the woman I met walking with me all the way down to the intersection where the bus stop was across from. She was clearly very scared for me, due to the fact that the guy eventually had started following us back. I felt so bad for dragging her into this situation. I felt so bad for dragging her into that situation. I didn't know if he would try to follow me all the way back home if we broke off there, or if he would decide to aim new focus onto this woman who was just simply at a park playing with kids she was babysitting. Before he could get too close to us, I walked over to some construction workers who were now working on the high school sign. I explained the whole situation to them and told them about how we thought it was weird that this man who initially was following me was now following us both. I pleaded with them to call the cops if he went past the bus stop or started following the lady. The construction workers happily agreed, and the woman and I went on our own ways. I don't know what happened to that man. I don't know if he was arrested or not. However, an hour later, my boyfriend had gotten home from work. We went out to run some errands, and as we were driving up the hill, there were 4 police cars parked around the intersection where I told the construction workers to call the police if the man was still trying to follow me. I'm just glad the police were called, especially with a high school being so close. I wouldn't have forgiven myself if he had tried to follow some poor high school kid home. So, to the man who was wearing a red and blue puffer jacket, who decided to follow me to a place I would go that I considered peaceful, content, and safe, thanks for teaching me to be more aware of people, but let's not meet. Ever again. Stranger at My House by Bored and Hungry. When I graduated college, I was about 24 years old. I really wanted to get out on my own and try living alone. Luckily for me, my grandma had asked to be moved into an assisted living center about a year prior. I had asked my parents if I could live in her house. They talked it over with my grandma, and she agreed it would be nice to have someone there after a year of it sitting empty. This was in kind of an up-and-coming area, but it still had its rough spots. I was so excited until I got there to do a walkthrough to see how I was going to set my things up. The house was a shotgun-style home with a cellar that could only be accessed from the outside. While I was walking through the house, I swore I was hearing noises. I finally realized the noises were coming from the basement. So I called the police and they came out and escorted out 6 people from the cellar. They were squatters that had been living there. And after they left, I went down there to find all kinds of stuff. The cops took all the drugs and anything else illegal. It looked like someone had spray painted the walls all over. It was just a concrete cellar where the water heater and HVAC was, so I wouldn't have really cared, except it seemed to be kind of satanic. I don't know anything about that stuff, but there were a couple of pentagrams and a chalk circle on the floor. The cops didn't really have anything to say about that. They didn't know anything about it either. So I poured some water on the floor to wash away the circle, but the walls I just left as they were. Fast forward to a few months of me living there. I had forgotten all about it. I had started dating my future wife, and she happened to be over visiting. We were getting ready for bed and in the bathroom brushing our teeth when a knock came from the back door. I ignored it, but it came again. It was 1 a.m., and this was my back door. Someone had to have come into my backyard by opening the fence gate. I grabbed my shotgun and went to the door, keeping it out of view. And there was some guy standing on the porch. I opened the interior wooden door, but kept the outside storm door shut and locked. I asked what he was there for. I asked him what he was here for since it was so late, and all he said was, "Is Christina here?" I told him he had the wrong house, and all he said was, "Oh, so do you want me to leave?" I told him he'd better leave and not come back. He just stood there, staring at me. I was getting very nervous at that point and shut the door. He walked down the steps and then just stood in my backyard staring back at the house. Then he tried to open the cellar doors. I had them padlocked, and after a little bit he gave up. I opened the back window and told him to get out of there before the cops showed up or he got shot, or both. Again, he just stared, but then he finally left. I didn't sleep that night. A couple of months later, my girlfriend told me that the guy was back, just standing in my backyard staring at the house. This time, it was broad daylight. I called the cops this time, and he tried the cellar doors again, but left before they showed up. The next day, I went down to the cellar to see if maybe there had been something left behind that he was trying to get, but I didn't find anything. It was just a damp, disgusting cellar with a dirt floor. I have zero idea why he wanted in there. I highly doubt the satanic stuff had anything to do with this. It just made everything that much creepier. Unfortunately, I had to move out sometime later, as I could no longer afford to live in the place. And I never saw that guy again. Encounter at the Park by Somber Horses. This happened when I was about 12 or 13. For context, I lived in an apartment complex that was 2 sets of rows, each row with 4 apartments. I lived in the apartment closest to the street of one row and had 2 cousins that lived in the apartment at the very end of the row, in the back. I would hang out with them just about daily. We were very into soccer at the time, and we would walk to a park about 4 or 5 streets away, along with some of the neighborhood kids, and play soccer. Now, I say neighborhood kids, but it was a big group of about 15 kids total, and their ages ranged from 10 years old all the way to 17. One of my 2 cousins was 17 years old, which is why my parents allowed me to go without their supervision. So, when this happened, like usual, we made our way to the park. Some of us would walk, and some of us would ride scooters or skateboards. I had my bike that day. We got to the park and we started playing, and about halfway through our game, my parents drove by and they called me from their car. They told me that they were going to the store and for me to wait at the park for them. Okay, no big deal. I figured they must have wanted to go somewhere else afterwards, and it was easier to pick me up from the park than for me to wait back at the house. Of course, that didn't make much sense because it's a 4-street distance. But at the time, to my 12-year-old mind, it was perfectly logical. We kept playing for another hour or so, and then as it got closer to sunset, more and more kids started making their way back to their houses. When my cousins wanted to leave, they asked me if I was ready, and I had said that my parents told me to wait for them there. So my cousins left and I stayed behind, and eventually it was just me. No big deal. I was familiar with the neighborhood and I had my bike and the energy of a 12-year-old. So I started riding my bike up and down the street, just killing time. At that point, it hadn't occurred to me that if my parents wanted me to wait for them at the park, they wouldn't have wanted me to wait past sunset. Eventually, I got impatient and hungry, but not wanting to get grounded for disobeying my parents, I kept waiting. Except instead of waiting at the park, I crossed the street and waited there. After a few minutes, a car drove up and stopped next to me. Nothing scary at that point. There was a stop sign there, so I didn't really pay it much mind. Except when it drove away, I realized the car looked weird. It was old and boxy, like an 80s car, but what stood out was that it looked spray-painted gray. It was definitely not real car paint, or done by a professional. I don't know, if maybe someone stole the car or would be dumb enough to draw that much attention to it, or if the look was intentional, but you could tell it was just spray-painted all over. Anyway, it drove away and I kept waiting, annoyed now. Then, the car came back from the other side of the street. I noticed it because it was hard to ignore at that point. My survival instincts were still not kicking in. Maybe these people were lost, or they just wanted to turn around without doing a U-turn. And since the park was a big square, going around it and coming back was easy enough to do. A few minutes went by, and they drove up again, and again they stopped at the stop sign. This time, I was starting to get nervous, so I took a better look at the car. 2 men were inside, scruffy-looking, unkempt beards, unkempt hair, dirty faces, and stains on their shirts. They looked at me, and they both smiled at the same time. Then they looked at one another, smiled even bigger, in the creepiest smiles I've ever seen someone do to this day. Then they drove away. Their smile creeped me out so much that now I was on high alert. I was watching the other side of the park where they would come from if they went around again like they did the first time. Sure enough, they did. That also meant that they were now on the same side of the street as me. So as soon as I saw the car, I jumped on my bike and rode as fast as I humanly could. I could hear one of them yelling something, but I honestly don't know what they said. I was too busy riding for my life. I could hear the car catching up, but I was too scared to even turn around and look. I somehow made it to my street and ran into our building, but I didn't want them to see where I lived since my apartment would have been the one visible from the street. So I went to the back behind my cousin's apartment and hid there. My reasoning was, if they followed me inside the building, they would see me knocking on their door and get me before anyone answered. Worth noting, if it's not obvious at this point, this was well before cell phones. I waited for what felt like a few hours, but was probably only 20 minutes or so, before I got enough courage to make the short walk down the row of apartments to mine, and I tried the door. It was unlocked, so I went inside, and my parents were there, sitting on the couch watching TV. They asked me how our game was, completely nonchalantly, and I questioned them and asked why they didn't pick me up. They both looked confused. They asked me why would they tell me to wait there instead of at home when it was only a 4-street difference and I had my bike. Once they said that, it did make more sense, but to this day I swear that they told me to wait in the park for them. They explained that when they drove up, they told me they were going to leave the door unlocked for me in case I got home before they did. In my excitement of the game, I must have just completely misheard them. I simply went to my room after that, never telling them about what happened because as a dumb kid, I knew if I said something they wouldn't let me go play soccer anymore, and that was clearly more important than my physical well-being. I never saw those guys or that car again. And I look back on it now, and it doesn't matter how fast I was pedaling my bike. They were in a car. They should have and could have caught up with me if they really wanted to. So I don't know what their intentions were. If they were just having a laugh at my expense, if they were trying to scare me, or if they actually had something darker in mind. But I do think back on that day now and get chills every time I realize how much different my life would be right now if they had caught me. So, to the 2 creepy men in the spray-painted car, let's not meet again. Typical haunting, submitted by non-believer. As you can tell by my name, I'm not really a believer in the paranormal. I've always believed there is a logical explanation for everything. I'm a skeptic through and through. The story that I'm going to tell happened to a colleague at work who is also a non-believer. It was interesting enough that, even though I still have my doubts, I feel compelled to share on his behalf because I know he wouldn't. As my title says, the things that happened and the whole experience he described was cliché. Very typical Hollywood movie haunting type stuff. But it all really happened, so he's not sure what to think. It started a couple of months ago. He lived in a new apartment complex, and it was just him and his wife, no kids or pets. The first incident was a pull chain lamp that would turn itself on and off randomly. He'd be sitting there watching TV, and he'd hear a click, and the light would go off. When he pulled the chain, the light would come back on. Sure, a little freaky, but no big deal, really. The second incident involved a laundry room door that they kept shut. They would come home or wake up in the middle of the night to find the door open again. And again, not a big deal. It could be easily explained. But then the incidents got a little more unexplainable. My friend had a model ship sitting on a bookcase in his living room. He woke up in the middle of one night, not sure why, and he got out of bed to check things out. He walked through the living room to the kitchen, and the door to the back porch was open. They live on the 3rd floor. He closed the door and walked back through the living room. That's when he noticed the model ship was sitting upright in the middle of the living room floor, with some coasters that were sitting on the end table stacked up neatly beside it. He knew neither he nor his wife had put those things there. And yeah, that is a little freaky. Those are the types of things that kept happening over the next few weeks, including an electric tea kettle that would turn itself on and off in the kitchen at all hours of the day. On Friday of last week, they came home to find all of the drawers of their dresser in their bedroom pulled out. The drawers and drawers on the TV armoire had been pulled out and opened as well. They knew they hadn't left those things like that, and there was no indication that anyone had broken in or entered the apartment. So my friend began thinking about what had changed or what he had brought into the house over the last couple of months that may have been linked to this apparent paranormal activity. And this is what made the skeptic in me even scratch my head and wonder. His ex-wife and he have a storage room that they've been gradually cleaning out over the past couple of years. He had mistakenly brought home a box that contained his ex-wife and her former husband's wedding rings. The former husband had been murdered a few years before my coworker and this woman had been married. He concluded that the activity was somehow connected to the dead husband's wedding ring, so he took the box back to the storage room that Saturday morning, and there were no incidents after that. Even I find this extremely interesting. I hope you do too, Uncle Josh. Almost Grabbed by Art of Poetry. I was 14. My two cousins M and S were 13 and 9 at the time. I'm 32 now. I grew up in West Virginia, in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of nowhere. My cousins would be dropped off for the summer and spring break at our grandpa's house, which was next door to mine, so I got to see them quite often. We would climb the mountains and go for walks up the road, and we would walk to what we called the first new house. Basically, someone new had built a house a mile from where I lived, and it had been a while, and most of the homes there were much older. Anyway, there was a mile that was just open, with no homes or anything within it. One day we decided to go for a walk, and we noticed a white van parked on the side of the road near a creek, but no people in it. We walked by it, and I told my cousins to stay near me because this was quite unusual. We walked by to the first new house and turned around to walk back home, and the van was still there. But this time, there were two men staring at us, standing next to it, and not looking away. They were just looking at us coldly, and I whispered to my oldest cousin to grab S and run. We took off running, and they started coming after us in the van. And finally, we'd come across the neighbor's yard, which had a creek right before the yard, and I told them to jump and throw my little cousin S down the hill into the creek, and I continued running. Luckily, my dad was standing on our bridge when I got there. I was freaking out and telling my dad that the two men were trying to get us into the van. As I was telling him this, the van drove by, and the two men gave me a stare that I can only describe as evil. I mean, their eyes held no emotion. My cousins were fine. S had some cuts from briars because I threw her over the hill, and I didn't jump because I had a bad knee and knew I wouldn't be able to run anymore if I had jumped. I just took my chances of my knee giving out by continuing down the road rather than knowing I wouldn't be able to get up if I had tried to jump. We never saw that van again. but we noticed the license plate had been covered, and there were no windows on the van except the ones in front. For some reason, I knew they had bad intentions. Well, luckily, we all got away from it just fine. Creepy Sleepover Experience by Joanna May. Last year during April, I was 14. I'm a female. I had a group of 3 friends, a 16-year-old female who we'll call F for this story, a 14-year-old female, L, and a 12-year-old male, Z. I had them come over to my house for a sleepover, this being the first sleepover I had ever had at my house. It started out normal with playing some games and taking the bus to Taco Bell for dinner, buying some snacks and watching TV. But when it got to around midnight, we decided to sneak out of my house via the back door and go to the park that was about 5 minutes away from where I lived. We played at the park for about 20 minutes and took some pictures before deciding to head towards the haunted woods nearby, which was our usual hangout place during the day, due to one of my uncle's friends giving us the idea that it was haunted the day prior. We always were there, knowing it was pretty haunted and had ghosts and what F said was the demon spirit of a man that had killed his own daughter in the woods about 10 years prior. F knew that for a fact, due to being a protector for young children's spirits, and she at one time had let the little girl's spirit attach onto her. For context, I'll explain. F is a medium and can see and speak to the dead, and often tells me where spirits are. It took us about 6 minutes to get into the woods, and upon arrival we came up with the idea to play hide and seek for a bit. We split into groups of 2, me and L and F and Z in the other group. L and I walked away while the other 2 counted. After about 5 minutes, we felt like we were being watched from the trees around us. But we ignored it, and I just played it off as my older brother, 17, who had a miscarriage, was just making sure we were safe. We found a hiding spot behind a bench that had a large bush behind it. We sat on the ground facing the bush. It was on the edge of the woods on a massive green area by the main road. At 1 a.m., the game started. F and Z were now looking for us. 5 minutes later, the creepy stuff started. We heard people talking, but no one was there. We heard movement in the bush and footsteps, but again, we didn't think too much of it due to it being a public area, and it was the weekend, so it could have been some teenagers. After 5 more minutes, I saw 2 bright flashlights in a clearing in the woods, and they were shining at us. Thinking it was our friends, I said to L, "It looks like we've been found." But after saying that, I got a phone call from F. I answered it, and F said, "Meet us by the pond now." I asked why. F said, "Just meet us by the pond." So I said all right. I agreed after hearing how scared she sounded. I hung up. The 2 of us got up and decided to run with our flashlights on across the green, since the pond was on the other side of it. I turned around to see if Elle was close behind me, which she was, but more diagonal. That's when my flashlight hit something skinny, large and pale gray on all 4s, crawling in an inhuman way, and crawling in the opposite direction of us. I continued running, but faster this time, not wanting to know what that thing was, and if maybe it was a skinwalker or something. We got to the pond, shined our flashlights at our friends to signal that it was us, and then we ran over to them. When we got to them, F told me that when they were looking for me, she felt something wrap its hands around her neck, almost choking her, and it saying, "1 down, 3 to go. Mac is next." I was Mac. We left the woods quickly and half ran back to my house, and we snuck back in and then saged ourselves and sat in the living room, which is where we were sleeping for the night. F asked me to come with her up to the bathroom to help her remove her makeup, and that's when she told me what she had heard the demon say in the woods. We told my older sister and went to sleep an hour later, and we've never been back to the woods at night since. Never Leave Your Drunk Friends Alone by BatfuckK. In my 20s, I was big into the nightlife scene, and it was my friend G's birthday. So a small group of us friends drove out to a club for drinks and dancing. G got way too drunk, and it was still pretty early on. So we walked her out to the car and let her sleep in the back seat while we finished our night of socializing. Before you say anything about that, this is a big city, and we all rode in the same car, so it wasn't as simple as driving her home right away, or we'd all have been stranded because public transit only runs so late, and this was before Lyft and Uber were common. I'll also say we were all simply younger and dumber. An hour or so later, we returned to the car to find G gone. So, panicking and driving around and around the neighborhood looking for her, we were wondering where the hell she went and why. It also started raining pretty heavily, which only made things scarier. And I remember sobbing and thinking there was no way I was going home until she was found. We saw a white figure walking down the sidewalk, and G had been wearing all white. So we pulled over, and there was this man we'd never seen before with G. A couple of us got out and started asking them both what was going on. I was still in the car, so I didn't hear the whole conversation. But when they were all done talking, G came back to the car. One of my friends said the man asked for money, and G told us that he was taking her to a hotel room. What? Long story short, my friend was picked up by a probable human trafficker or whatever else. And if we hadn't found her in time, who knows what could have happened. Car Crash, submitted by Autumn Wicca. It was about a year ago today, and I'm not sure really what that means, but I'm going to tell you about a car crash that could have happened right in front of my eyes. I don't remember where we were at the time, but last year my family and I were going to a hotel. It was a local hotel, close to where we lived. We decided to go out and eat before we went there, and when we got there, I saw this lady. She was just an old lady who looked to be around 70 or so. She got out of her car with a man staying behind. The car was green, but I'm not sure what type of car it was. I'm pretty sure that the man that was with her was her husband. They went inside the place, and so did we. We ordered food, but the lady and the man were just sitting at their table, just talking, I guess. Then the lady got up to go use the bathroom, and for some unknown reason, I followed. We were both in the bathroom, and the lady came out of a stall, and then left. I really didn't have to go or anything. I was just drawn to this little old lady for some strange reason. I couldn't explain why. We left the restaurant a little after the lady and the man did. We were on our way to the hotel, and we came to a red light at a four-way intersection. My dad stopped the car, and I looked out the window, and the lady and the man pulled up right next to us. I looked up to the light, and it was still red. I looked at the clock. It was 7:39. I looked back at the old lady. The light hadn't turned green, but the old man slammed on the gas and crashed head-on with another car across the street. I started to say something to my dad because nobody was doing anything about it. No one was there trying to help this couple. I looked over at my mom, and then I looked back at the road, and my dad started to go. I started to yell at him, but he just told me to quiet down, and I looked at the road again. And the cars that had crashed were both gone. The lady's car was next to us again. Then they turned down a side road and we drove straight ahead. When we got to the hotel that night, My mom put the news on TV, and they were reporting a car accident that had happened earlier in the day. I looked at the screen, and it had just happened to be at the same intersection that we were at that day. The news showed a little bit of the crash. I guess a helicopter was recording it or something, because wherever it was high up in the sky. They said that the crash happened at 7:44 p.m. That was almost 5 minutes after we left that red light. They had gotten closer to the crash with the cameras, and it showed that one of the cars was green, and it looked just like the old lady's car. A bystander came on and said that there was a lady and the man in one of the cars, and they had been in the green car that crashed. I wasn't completely sure if this meant anything or not, but I was in shock. I had just seen that lady not that long ago. Again, I was just sitting in shock. I had no idea that was going to happen. I'm not sure if the lady or the man lived or not. I still don't know to this day. But I wish I did. For some reason, I was attracted to that lady. I liked her. She seemed nice. I hope she really is still alive. But I'm not sure what to think about this anymore. It happened a year ago, and I try not to think about it too much. But somehow, I thought that I was supposed to try and stop it from happening. But how could I stop a car crash? I didn't have any idea at the time, and I still don't. I don't think I ever will. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you're catching this on YouTube and you like what you heard, please give the video a thumbs up. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the stories. And if you're not a subscriber, hey, today's a new day, why not become a subscriber? Maybe even tell a friend about the channel. I'd appreciate it. Follow me on social media, and of course, if you'd like to take your support of the channel a step further, a link to my Patreon page is down there in the description, as well as a link to my storefront at tpublic.com. Get yourself some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. There's other designs up there as well. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.